Hi, welcome to Exploring the Illusion of Free Will. My name is George Ortega, and this is like September 26th, 2014. This is episode number 170. Now, this is part of the series that we're doing on this book that I published in April of this year, titled Free Will, Its Refutation, Societal Cost, and Role in Climate Change Denial. So we're up to part 7 of this series. All right, and we might as well get right into it. So let's see. We're on page 15 of the book, and we're critiquing an article by a PhD named Meyer, who published in 2011. Just like, let me reiterate, his article was published in Ethics and Medicine, 2011, and it's titled "Is Free Will an Illusion?" J.R. Meyer, I believe. So, all right. So basically, let's see. So on page 15, he's referencing another researcher, Ellis, and he's suggesting. And all right, just before we start, I'll get into the definitions of free will as we generally do, and why this is important, perhaps within the context. But I just want to get right into it. I mean, it's like we've got this book is let's see, 31 pages, so we're halfway through it. So this might be a 15-part series. Who knows? All right, so basically, Ellis, he's referencing Ellis, who says that the constituent particles at the micro level, albeit devoid of individual properties as such, are influenced by extrinsic factors that modify their native indeterminacy and give rise to quote-unquote entangled states that would allow for the emergence of free will. Now, if you couldn't understand what that meant, I don't blame you, because it's just like a confluence of nonsense. The person doesn't understand this. This guy Ellis, he doesn't understand quantum mechanics. First of all, although I didn't get into the complete defense in the book, let me just do it now. Or the complete refutation to this assertion. Basically, he's contending that the constituent particles like just, at the quantum level, at the micro level, albeit devoid of individual properties, they are not devoid of individual properties. And basically what he's saying, there's this Heisenberg uncertainty principle that prohibits us from simultaneously measuring the particles' position and momentum. Now, some people like Ellis, quite, mysteriously, really, because this isn't complicated. They conclude that since we can't measure these attributes of the particle simultaneously, they can't have them simultaneously. The absurdity of that assertion, I think, can be seen by, let's say you've got a coin on a table, right? And you can only see it's the heads is up, right? So you can only see the heads. You can't see the tails of it, right? And so you're going to assume, well, I can't see the tail and the head at the same time. So a coin cannot have a head and tail at the same time. That's I think a good example of how absurd that the notion that Ellis is presenting is. But anyway, so then he goes on to say that these individual particles are influenced by extrinsic factors that modify their native indeterminacy. His second mistake. Okay, these particles are not indeterminate. Another misinterpretation of this Heisenberg uncertainty principle and its implications. Basically, the idea is that we cannot, at the same time, measure the simultaneous position and momentum of a particle. So though that measurement becomes quote-unquote indeterminate, right? But that doesn't mean that the particle, in other words, and what this person is asserting or claiming is that the particle is basically he's trying to refute causality. He's saying that the particle isn't subject to causality, that the particle's behavior is just random in the strong sense of like uncaused. And that's like what he means by indeterminacy. So anyway, he's saying that like extrinsic factors are influencing this particle's native randomness, causing it, giving rise to, oh my God, entangled states. This sentence is so filled with misunderstandings and nonsense. So anyway, he's saying that like that extrinsic factors are making this this otherwise randomly behaving particle suddenly become causal. And then that is giving rise to entangled states that would allow for the emergence of free will. All right, let's leave the entangled states out to begin with, or right now. All right, so let's say this extrinsic factor would imbue this particle, which he says is not causal, with causality. I mean, it is, but so like the best that gets him is that, so all right, so like the particle is influenced by a cause, and right, so as soon as he proposes that, he's introduced causality. And once you introduce causality into a statement or an exploration of either particle behavior or human behavior, human decision making, then you've influenced a chain of cause and effects. In other words, like, so like if something is causing this particle to behave, then something is causing whatever caused that particle to behave. And something is causing that cause, and something is causing that cause, and these causes are always going back in time, and the best way to see is like they're going back in time as can be illustrated by the states of the universe. In other words, like the state of the universe prior to the particles doing what it did caused it to do what it did. The state of the universe before that caused that state of the universe, and so like, and this chain of cause and effect spans back to before the person was born, before the planet was created, all the way to the Big Bang, and who knows what happened. All right, so anyways, that basically what I'm saying is like to introduce causality into this quote unquote native indeterminacy, which is nonsense. That just makes the free will problem worse. But then he refers to entangled states. All right, entanglement is like, it's a very mysterious phenomenon. I mean, you have a particle, right? Which is, I mean, they don't understand it, but it in no way allows for free will. Basically, you have a particle, right? And somehow you split it where like one half of the particle, because they're kind of like, they're just like joined, So one half of the particle is like at one end of the universe. The universe like expands 13.7 billion. I mean, it's a very huge. And the other part of the particle, whatever, of this pair is in the other end of the universe. And like amazingly, according to the theory, and this has been kind of like generally verified, they have instantaneous, faster than the speed of light communication between them. All right, so now that's what entanglement means. That's what quantum entanglement means. There's nothing within that phenomenon that gives any leeway for free will. So what? They're communicating, at faster than the speed of light. That, incidentally, is allowed by relativity, because relativity, I can't talk about it because, like, I've been working too hard. I haven't been sleeping enough. Anyway, relativity prohibits a particle from accelerating from below the speed of light to faster than the speed of light. It doesn't, because some people, mistakenly conclude that nothing can go beyond the speed of light, but relativity doesn't prohibit that. It simply prohibits the acceleration, again, from before, slower than the speed of light to faster. But, these entangled particles could theoretically, quite in keeping with physical law, be communicating instantaneously at a speed maybe much faster than the speed of light. Who knows? But anyway, there's nothing in that would allow for free will. And this might take 20 episodes at the rate we're going. All right, here we go. So, but basically, like, all right, in the book I say basically, like, that doesn't, these extrinsic factors that he was claiming, or giving, they have causes, all right? So that would refute the free will. I explained that before. Okay, so now he goes to, he's challenging Daniel Wegner's 2002 book called, it's a classic book, The Illusion of Conscious Will, where he demonstrates how we don't have a conscious will, and in order to have a free will, you would have to have a conscious will. So anyway, basically, Wegner, Daniel Wegner, great scientist, he passed away, unfortunately, a couple of years ago or so. He asserted that conscious will is an illusion. So here's, Meyer is like, basically he's saying that some unconscious actions like heart rate and blood pressure and learning to direct thoughts away from obsessive patterns of cognition, panic attacks, and bouts of depression are voluntary mechanisms. Okay, he's essentially claiming that these things, unconscious actions like heart rate, can actually be controlled with our conscious mind. They can't, and I won't get into. I might as well. Should I? Yeah, I think I will. All right. Very, very briefly. Okay. The reason these heart rate, blood pressure, learning to direct thoughts from obsessive thought patterns, whatever we do consciously, the reason it's not decided at the conscious level is as follows. All right, in order to decide something, our mind has to rely on a database of first principles by which to decide. We generally decide what we decide based on its rationality. Does it make sense? If you have two glasses, and a pitcher of water, and only one glass will hold the contents of what's in the pitcher of water, you're not going to pour it into the one that won't. Okay, so reason, constrains or is a principle by which we decide. Another principle is morality. If we consider something to be wrong, we're not going to do it. We're not going to take that option. So these principles, now they reside in our unconscious. Because when you make decisions, you don't have these principles in your conscious mind, all the time. They're in your unconscious. So anyway, so you've got the principles for decision making in the unconscious. The other thing that you have in the unconscious, and the unconscious, incidentally, by definition, is that part of our mind that we are not even aware of, let alone able to control. They call it the unconscious because we are not conscious of it. Our conscious mind is not aware of the unconscious. All right, so the idea is whenever we make a decision, directing thoughts away from obsessive patterns of cognition. So these patterns of cognition would be stored as memory, again, in our unconscious, because we don't, our unconscious is a storehouse of vast information. Our conscious mind can only be aware of one, at most maybe two or three things at a time. All right, so basically you have the principles by which we decide residing in the unconscious, and the data that these principles are going to be acting on to decide residing in the unconscious. And the unconscious, again, is completely hidden, from conscious, awareness. What that tells you quite simply is that when we make any decision, like controlling panic attacks, etc., and all that, what's happening is our unconscious, using its principles, its methods of deciding, is sifting through the data in the unconscious, okay, because that's where the data is, making a decision, and then what happens is we become aware or conscious of the decision our unconscious has made. So essentially all decisions, as Wegner correctly describes in his classic book, again, 2002, decisions are not made by our conscious mind, they're made by our unconscious mind. So anyway, but the other, the refutation to Meyer's claim that I make on this book, again, it's page 15, is that let's say, all right, regardless of how we want to describe the decision, as whether it's conscious or unconscious, either prospect would be subject to causality. So in other words, there'd be a cause for the quote-unquote conscious decision, as there is a cause for the unconscious decision. And there's a cause, and we just explained causality. So in other words, causality would apply to these conscious and or unconscious decisions. So again, so that's why his defense of free will in that case doesn't work. All right, we're on page 16. Okay, now, wait a minute. All right, let's see, hold on. Yes, all right, so we're on 16 now. Now we're starting with, on page 16, Al Mealy. Now, Mealy is a philosopher, University of Florida. He's publishing a book, actually, I think this October, his first book for the public, because these philosophers who believe in free will, they just generally publish academic books for themselves, because they're the only people on the planet that are, deluded enough to buy into the nonsense that they write. But anyway, he's publishing a book for the public in a month or so. I'm not sure I'm going to get it or not, because I've seen his stuff, and he writes very well, but he's clueless in terms of understanding what he's writing. Okay, so basically what he's saying, top of page 16, and so wait a minute, this is based on an article he published in 2012, and it's called Another Scientific Threat to Free Will, ? And it's published in the journal Monist, again, 2012. So, all right, he's claiming that, his first claim is that, quote, scientists, neuroscientists, and others have not proved that free will is an illusion and have not provided powerful evidence for that claim. Okay, first of all, Mealy, who's a philosopher, doesn't understand that science does not deal with quote-unquote proof. It deals with levels of confidence, okay? So, that's an understanding. And actually, I deal with that assertion on the first page of my book. It says, I'll quote here, while science deals with levels of confidence rather than proof, I argue that science evidences the causality at the heart of determinism and refutes free will with a level of confidence comparable to our knowledge that the universe exists and that it is in constant motion. So, that's the second part of Mealy's assertion, that science has not provided powerful evidence, disproving free will. My answer is science has provided something more powerful than evidence to refute free will, because as I explained earlier in the book, and you'd either have to get the book or go to the previous episodes where I explained this, science, logic, reason refutes free will at a level of science and logic and reason that's more fundamental than empiricism, than empirical evidence. And what I'm referring to is a priori knowledge. In other words, the proof is for example, a priori is self-evident, you can't refute it. You couldn't begin to question it. In other words, you can't question that existence exists, okay? Reality, the universe, it exists. No one could ever successfully say, no, it doesn't exist. And I don't care if you think it's a dream or whatever. Existence exists, okay? The second a priori, irrefutable fact of reality is that it is in motion. If it wasn't in motion, you wouldn't be, nothing would happen. Nothing would have ever happened. There would have been no planets, no suns, nothing, everything would be frozen if there was a motion. So you've got two fundamental a priori facts of the universe. It exists and it's in motion. Okay, now what is motion? Motion is physically a particle being in one place in the universe at one moment in time and being in a different place in the universe at the next moment in time. Okay, and so there's an explanation for that, and that's called momentum. So in other words, momentum causes the shift in position of the particle from one state of the universe to the next. Now, once you've introduced causality at that level of reasoning, that level of understanding, the fundamental process of the universe change, then you can understand how causality, the principle, the law that Mealy is claiming science hasn't provided evidence for, is so fundamental that it's more fundamental than empirical evidence. It's a priori. Okay, so I say in truth, because science shows that causality is a priori, not only does science provide devastating evidence against free will, it does so through unimpeachable means. Okay, we got about 8 minutes, and we've got a page. We're doing good. Okay. All right, so then he's asking, which conception of free will empirical evidence refutes? Well, again, the empirical evidence refutes it also, because, there's, in other words, there's never been an empirical finding that shows something is uncaused. Everything that we observe in nature is caused, and that's what refutes free will. Some people say, well, radioactive decay, we've never seen the cause of like when it decays, why it decays at a certain rate, whatever, the half-life and all that. Well, the thing is like, if you'd be claiming that radioactive decay or any other kind of like scientific process doesn't have a cause, basically you're asserting that based on your ignorance. It's kind of as if like, let's say you open the door and there's somebody there you've never seen, right? And like you don't know how that person got there. So you're gonna like claim that the person didn't walk or drive there because you didn't see the person walk or drive there. So the person just got there for no cause. All right, reality doesn't work that way. Reason doesn't work that way. All right, so basically, all right, so like now the idea is it doesn't. So he's basically in this. He's saying which conception of free will does empirical evidence would refute. Okay. Some conceptions of free will say that, well, I have free will if I make a decision, because it's my decision and I'm making it. All right. I think empirical, evidence, first of all, that's an absurd kind of like free will defense. In other words, like that's like saying that a robot or a puppet has free will because if it moves its arm or, does something, it did it. It doesn't matter that it's on strings or like there's a hand moving it. If it did it, because that's the assertion. Some people like merely say, if we did it, then that's free will. No, that's not free will. That's a straw man argument for free will that doesn't address the classic debate about whether humans have free will or not. And so, all right. So anyway, so we're it's an absurd contention. Basically, they can't refute the fact that absolutely nothing is up to us, which is like what the refutation of free will is about. So in order to claim free will, they changed the definition of what they mean by free will. And Kant did this. These guys, how could you do that? That's like completely unprofessional, unobjective, All right. So, all right, got 5 minutes. So anyway, I like my... so like noting, what I say to that is noting the a priori knowledge supersedes empirical evidence. Causality refutes any and all conceptions of free will that attribute it to humans. Humans do not have free will, regardless, whatever. Okay, so now here's another. This next statement just kind of like demonstrates his lack of understanding of physics. Because basically he's saying, or physics and reason, because like causality is not just a physical construct, it's also a logical, rational construct. So he's saying that, quote, as long as the causal chain goes through the agent is the person, or whatever's deciding for the person, in an appropriate way, the agent can exercise free will. What Mealy doesn't understand, there is no quote-unquote appropriate way for the causal chain to go through an agent. In other words, like he's claiming, like let's say you have like 100 dominoes, and he's saying that like if there's an appropriate way for the 99th domino to tumble the 100th without it having been influenced by the tumbling of the 98 antecedent dominoes. Okay, no, causality, I like my answer to this. And actually I use this, I didn't realize. I use this example in the book. Okay, so, all right, I just explained that. So like basically, let's see, hold on. All right, so an agent can neither circumvent nor assume authorship of an action compelled upon it by antecedent causes. All right, so there is no appropriate way to interfere with a causal chain. A causal chain is like, an agent makes a decision, there's a cause for that decision, there's a cause for that cause. You can't slide things into that. That's not the way reality works, that's not the way science works, that's not the way physics works. Okay, now he's like, his next assertion is like, let's say there's a tie. Let's like, we want an apple or maybe we want an orange, but we don't really know, we're not sure. So he's saying that like, he refers to this as a tie-breaking mechanism. Again, we're at the bottom of page 16. He says, quote, even if some action ties are broken for us unconsciously, well before we are aware of what we intend to do. And there he's referring to the Libet experiments, these neurology experiments that just blow free will out of the water. It certainly does not follow from this that we never make effective conscious decisions. It does follow from it, and basically he's saying that we decide things consciously, and I don't think I have to refute it again, because basically because the principles by which we decide and the data that we're deciding on both reside in the unconscious. We never make any conscious decisions. And again, Daniel Wegner, 2002, The Illusion of Conscious Will, he just goes, the entire book just goes through all these kinds of experiments, ways of illustrating in so many ways, we think we're making conscious thoughts when we're not. Anyway, but just in principle, in principle, consciousness is only awareness. Consciousness has nothing to do with decision making. Consciousness is awareness of what the unconscious has decided. Okay, and we've got all right, a minute and 30 seconds, and I think I'm going to end here because I gotta see what comes next or whatever. So all right, this show is on Thursdays, and I think another day, I think maybe Tuesday or something. I don't know. It's on twice in White Plains, and we've got a Manhattan show that's on on Wednesdays at 11. These episodes you can see on YouTube. They're all on YouTube. They're on the Internet Archive. If you've got iTunes, I convert them to MP3. They're up there. We've got the meetup in Manhattan. Okay, there's Exploring the Illusion of Free Will. We meet at the Sony Plaza between Madison and 5th, between 55th and 56th Streets. That's the first Saturday of each month at 2 o'clock. And then we have another event in Manhattan, The Implications of No Free Will. That's an event that takes place, I don't know, if you go to meetup.com, New York City, Exploring the Illusion of Free Will. It's a great meetup. That meetup is what started this popular interest in free will in the media. I mean, between 2010, when I started that meetup, and 2012, there were about 36 articles in major publications, Time Magazine, New York Times, Scientific American, etc., often for the first time ever refuting free will. That's all we have time for. I'll see you again next time on Exploring the Illusion of Free Will. Thanks.